Hello, welcome. Nice to see you all in the various different places that you are. Brian's joining us from Spain in his coat, which is amusing me no end. So I'm Rachel Graham. I have been doing work within music, delivering music, teaching music, managing music projects for 25 years now, which I worked out earlier on and got slightly freaked out about. And I've been doing safeguarding training for about 13 years now. I was trained by the NSPCC as a trainer. That's kind of how I come to be here now. I work for an organisation called TiPP. We're a participatory arts organisation that specialises in working in criminal justice settings. And we, as part of our work, do quite a lot of safeguarding training because we have quite an enhanced experience of dealing with safeguarding issues on a sort of day-to-day basis because of the particular vulnerabilities of the people that we're working with. And we're absolutely delighted that we've recently been appointed safeguarding associates with youth music. So hopefully there's going to be more a series of safeguarding resources provided by TiPP for organisations funded by youth music to be able to access. Okay, so today it's very much aimed at face-to-face workers. So we have only got a very short amount of time. So we are focusing today on people that are, and the work that you are doing, that is the face-to-face work, okay? It's very informal. There's not too many of us here. So if you do have any questions, if anything crops up, if you can bob it in the chat, I will keep an eye on the chat. Phoebe and Rachel, I'm marshalling the pair of you as well to help me out with that. I know some people use the hands up thing, but I find it really tricky to kind of keep an eye on the hands up and spot the hands up. So if you pop anything in the chat, we'll come back to it as soon as we can. We're going to go through what safeguarding is, some underlying principles, who we need to consider within safeguarding, what our role is within safeguarding, and then I've got a slide at the end that's got some follow-up resources on it, including my email address. So if anything desperate comes up at the end, you don't feel you want to talk about it in this group, you can always email me afterwards and we can arrange a chat. Okay, is that all right with everybody? Right, I'm going to try and share my screen. That one. Oh, come on, computer. There we go. Is that, so everybody's hopefully got my lovely starting slide that I probably should have put up while I was doing that whole spiel so that you could see the logos of TiPP and youth music, if nothing else. So anyway, what is safeguarding? I used to do at the beginning of these sessions where I get people to kind of write in the chat or shout out what safeguarding, what that word means to them. The words that always came up were always the same. So lots and lots of people will think about protection. Lots and lots of people will think about harm and prevention of harm, which is all amazing. Some people would write in the chat that they were quite nervous. It was a scary word. It was something that made them feel quite anxious because there was lots of legislation and things that they had to do that they didn't really understand. So hopefully today we'll get rid of some of that. But the main thing about the word safeguarding in this context is that it is a verb. It's a proactive thing, okay? You can use safeguarding as a noun, but it's much more common for it to be used as a verb. And it is very much something that we are doing all the time. Safeguarding isn't a set of principles or a set of policies that sits on a shelf and is pulled out when something goes wrong. It's something that you are doing all the time, okay? There's a consideration that is going underpinning all of your work. It is absolutely common sense. That is the thing I want everybody to take away. The two things, if nothing else, that you take away from today, it's common sense and it's a proactive thing. Okay. So I don't want anybody to ever be afraid of safeguarding. Okay. There are bits of legislation, there are guidance documents out there. If anybody has insomnia and wants to go and read the Working Together document, then be my guest. But 90% of it is about just trusting your instincts, it being common sense, and knowing who to talk to if the alarm bell in the back of your head is going off. Okay. People think sometimes about safeguarding being about child protection, and child protection is very much a part of safeguarding, but safeguarding is much broader than that. As I said, keep saying, and we'll say umpteen times throughout this hour, it is a proactive thing, okay? And it is the broader obligation on all of us to be promoting the welfare of our participants. Okay, so I'm going to say that again because it's so important. It's the promotion of the welfare of our participants. Okay, so yeah, that's what safeguarding is. It's not a scary thing, I promise. Okie dokie. So moving on, I've got 3 principles here that sort of underpin our practice within safeguarding. If you were to Google the principles of safeguarding, you will find that there are 6, but there's 3 of them that are very much kind of at an organizational level. These are the 3 that are the most significant for the people doing face-to-face work. And hopefully you will look at these and go, well, yeah, that's really obvious. Well, yeah, of course I'm going to prevent people from coming to harm. Of course, my work, so much of the work that we do as musicians, as organizations, is about empowering people, and of course we're going to protect people, like as if we're going to go out and deliberately do harm to people. So this is what I'm saying about this being common sense. Okay, this is just common sense stuff. There's no rocket science here. It's just about trusting your instincts. So we're just going to break down the 3 of these a little bit more. So prevention. So preventing harm and to health and development of our participants. Okay, taking action before any harm occurs. Yeah. Is that making sense to people? It's fairly kind of obvious, isn't it, what the word prevention means? Empowerment. So empowering people to be supported in making their own decisions. Now that's slightly trickier. It's about supporting people to develop their skills in order to keep themselves safe. With adults, so over 18s, that includes empowering them to make decisions, even if you feel that the decisions that they're making are not the best decisions for them. So that's the one big difference between safeguarding for under 18s and over 18s. As far as you're concerned, as people that are doing face-to-face work, you don't really need to worry about that too much, okay? Because if that alarm bell is going off in your head that something's not right and somebody is at risk of harm, then you're going to do the same thing with that information. The real difference between the under 18s and the over 18s comes at that higher level. Once you've reported that concern and spoken to the people that you're going to speak to about that concern, what they do with that is then where the difference between under 18s and over 18s legislation comes in. Okay. Lots and lots of people get really kind of concerned about the difference between under 18s and over 18s. And over 18s, we now call adults at risk. The legislation, the guidance, it used to talk about, well, some of it still does talk about vulnerable adults because it was written in 2000. But the more recent updates to it and the more recent kind of additions to it has changed the language to adults at risk in recognition of the fact that it's not really the adult who is vulnerable. It is the situation or the circumstances that they find themselves in that might make them more vulnerable or might make them more susceptible to harm or to exploitation, to neglect or to abuse. So again, if we think about that change in language, that gives us another insight into empowerment, because we are empowering people to live the best life that they can, to make their own decisions. Yeah. I'm sorry if it looks like I'm looking over onto one side. I've got another screen over here that I'm reading my notes off. Within empowerment, we also talk about informed consent. And that again comes into supporting people to make their own decisions, and to develop the skills to be able to keep themselves safe. That's a really tricky one, particularly if we're talking about young people at the upper end of the teenage years. And I'll give you a really good example that we deal with on a regular basis. So we are working within a youth justice setting with young people who are aged sort of 15, 16, 17 years old. So in society, much of society would view them as adults, or as young adults at least. There are several laws that treat them as adults. There are several that don't. And when they're writing lyrics, they are trying to emulate, they want to be like the artists that they're seeing in the charts. But we know that if they are to record those lyrics that contain things about seemingly glorifying drug use, or talking about violence and gang violence, or opposition gangs and creating beef and things like that, that can put them at huge risk. It can put them at risk of violence and crime. It can also put them at risk of that information, that recording, being used against them within courts, which has happened in Manchester. If anybody's interested, there was a case last year of 10 young people who were charged with a really serious offence, and some of them weren't present at the offence, but they were charged on the basis of a WhatsApp conversation, and the lyrics of some of the music that they were putting out on YouTube and social media was used by the prosecution to paint them as a criminal gang with intent to cause harm. So we talk about that case quite a lot with our young people, because we want them to understand the risk that it is that they are putting themselves in. Because it would be really easy for us to kind of just say, well, no, you can't write those lyrics within our sessions. But that's not empowering them to make a decision to be able to keep themselves safe outside of our sessions, because we all know that young people are going to put stuff out on social media. It's so easy to write a track these days and record it and stick it out. There are a myriad of different apps that I can't keep track of that are really easily accessible on a mobile phone. that you can put stuff out on. So all the time thinking about empowerment, making people aware of why the decisions that you're making are, why you're making the decisions that you're making, why you're trying to encourage people to do certain things, in the hope that some of that might go out into helping them keep themselves safe within their broader lives. Does that make sense to people? Excellent. Okay, so the final one of these 3 principles is around protection. And again, hopefully nothing massively shocking with that statement being there, that that protection is one of the principles of safeguarding. Obviously, we're wanting to protect people from abuse and from harm, and we're wanting to support and represent those that have greatest need. So that sort of leads us into thinking about the different people that we're working with. What does that phrase greatest need mean? What I'm going to do is I am going to prompt you with a question, and I don't particularly need you to share it in the app or in the chat or anything, but I want you to just think about the last group of people that you worked with. So if you were in a session last night or earlier this week or over the weekend, last week, just think about one particular group of people that you're working with or have worked with recently, and think about the things that obviously were there that made you think, okay, that person might need a little bit more help in this session. So my thing that I'm always thinking about is the really, really obvious one is age. So if I see a 3-year-old walking down the street on their own, I'm going to be really concerned about that 3-year-old. If I see a 17-year-old walking down the street on their own, I'm not going to be worried about that 17-year-old. So age can make somebody really quite vulnerable in certain situations. A 3-year-old might need a lot more support in being able to access something that you are running compared to a 17-year-old. If somebody has access needs, is a wheelchair user, for instance, then that's a really obvious thing that you might need to be aware of. So hopefully within your head now, you've got maybe 2 or 3 things that within that group of people are really obvious support needs that people might have, or things that you need to be aware of, that you might need, that people that might need just a little bit of extra support or extra help to really be able to thrive in your sessions. Now I want you to think about that same group of people, and I want you to think about 2 or 3 things that might not be so obvious. Things that were hidden, that you might not be able to see, that you might never know about, that would mean that somebody is struggling a little bit, or somebody is working extra hard to be able to access your sessions. Some of that answer might be based upon your knowledge of the broader statistics and demographics of the people that you're working with. So, as I said at the beginning, we specialize in working in criminal justice settings. We know that literacy levels within criminal justice settings tend to be quite low. So we will take that into account when we are planning our workshops. We will make sure that our workshops are accessible to people who may have low literacy levels. But there's other things as well, things like people who are carers, young carers. And they may not come in, they may not recognize that label, that term. So they may not come in to you and be able to tell you and articulate that they are a young carer. But as you get to know somebody, you might start to pick up on little things that they say, like, oh, I've got to go because I've got to get the kids to bed. I've got to get my brother to bed. I've got to cook tea for my mum. Little hints that over a period of time start to build up a picture that makes you kind of think that that relationship is not quite what you would expect, and that there might be some help and support and things that you could do to help somebody. Somebody might be suffering mental health issues, and we know that that's a very fluid state. Yeah, somebody can be really bright and chirpy either because their mental health is in a good place at that point in time, or because they're very good at masking. But then the next week they come to you and that's really taken a dive, and they're not coping so well with their mental health issues, or their mask is slipping. Just because they may come back the following week and the mask is back on doesn't mean you go, oh, everything's fine. Okay, you've still got that in your mind of there's something going on there. Okay. And all of that is hopefully what I am sure, is what you are all doing anyway. Because all of that has a huge overlap with your diversity and inclusion policies and your practice. Anybody that has any kind of ethical practice and has thought through the ways in which they're going to make sure that the people that are coming into their session has a great time, is able to access everything that they want to do, is able to get the most out of those sessions. You're going to be doing all of those things within that anyway, aren't you? All nod. Yes. Oh, there we go. Everybody is still alive. Good. So none of this, as I said at the beginning, none of this is rocket science. And people don't necessarily always recognize this as safeguarding. But this is safeguarding, ensuring that your sessions are accessible, that they are safe, that you are supporting everybody in being able to access your sessions. That's safeguarding. Those are the principles that underpin your practice. Okay. If you are interested in, I did say there are 6. For anybody that is interested in what the other 3 are, they are partnership, accountability, and proportionality. There you go. And if you are interested, you can, as I say, Google principles of safeguarding, and you'll find lots and lots of different websites that will talk about those 6 things. Okay, I have a lovely, really cheesy stock image of people. I'm really sorry about the cheesy stock image, but this is just kind of a visual placeholder for you to think about people. Different people. Who are we talking about when we're thinking about safeguarding? Again, I used to do this I've done this a few times where I've asked people to put suggestions in the chat. And the things that come back are all somebody always says, everyone, which is amazing. Yes, everyone. But we need to unpick that a little bit. Okay. So there are our participants. And within everything that I've been sort of talking about so far, I've talked a lot about some participants. So the people that we're working with, we're planning our sessions to be safe. We're planning our sessions to empower people to be able to get the best out of them, to be able to make decisions, to be able to input their ideas, youth voice, participant voice, participant-led practice. If you're doing these things well, which I'm sure you all are, then you're doing safeguarding already. Okay. It's just about recognizing and articulating that as a part of safeguarding. So the participants that we're working with, yes. And we've already talked a little bit about under 18s and over 18s and the fact that actually as face-to-face workers, you don't need to worry about that too much. Yeah. Obviously, you're going to have a slight eye to the fact that something that makes a 3-year-old vulnerable would not necessarily make a 17-year-old vulnerable, but that's your instincts as a practitioner and your relationship with the people that you're working with that's going to inform whether or not that alarm bell is going off in the back of your head. Okay. The other people so everybody always says participants when I ask for the suggestions in the chat. The other group of people that we really need to consider and that you have a responsibility for within safeguarding is yourselves and your colleagues. Okay, so just as in health and safety legislation, there's a huge crossover between health and safety and safeguarding. So you going round and gaffer taping down the cables within a project, yes, that's health and safety, but that's also preventing harm. So that is safeguarding as well. So you have a responsibility to be promoting the welfare and protecting yourselves and your colleagues. And that includes protecting yourselves from the risk of somebody being able to accuse you of something. So having a check on your own behaviors, on your own practice. Are you operating in a way that is transparent? Are people understanding what it is that you are doing? Are you talking to people about why you're doing what you're doing? Do you have lone working policies in place in order to protect you, make sure that you are safe? Do you have co-working policies in place? So we as an organisation don't do any lone working. We always have more than one of us in the space. And that is to reduce the risk of harm and to reduce the risk of accusations being made. And if accusations are made, you've got witnesses, you've got a second pair of eyes on the situation. So it's thinking through all of those things. And it may be that you're a peripatetic instrumental teacher and that lone working is just part of the job. That's absolutely fine, but you need to do a risk assessment of that lone working. And again, whenever I say the word risk assessment, you can kind of almost feel the kind of bristles on people's backs and the shivers down spines go up, because risk assessments have a reputation for being incredibly dull, very tick box exercise, and really quite kind of just like unnecessary paperwork. Yeah, we know all this. Nobody's saying it has to be a massively formal written document for every single activity that you do. But what you do need to have done is thought through and documented somewhere what those major risks are and how you're mitigating them. Okay. And again, people think of that as being health and safety. It's safeguarding too. So a good safeguarding policy will include, you're getting freebies now because this is actually from a different training session, but a good safeguarding policy will include a risk assessment. So, or some kind of nod to that. So have a chat with your organizations that you're working with and ask them about the risk assessments with regards to the activity that you're working on. There is one really, really important person within each organization with regards to safeguarding. And this is not to say that you're not all really, really important people, because of course you are. But when it comes to safeguarding, every organization that is working with young people or with adults at risk has what a designated safeguarding lead. Sometimes that title varies slightly. So they're sometimes just called safeguarding lead. They're sometimes got weird and wonderful names. But it's normally quite clear that that is the person that is responsible for safeguarding across the organization. Okay. That person will be responsible for making sure that everybody's got suitable training, that the policies and procedures are in place and that they're up to date. And that person is also the person that, if you have a concern, you need to report to, you need to be contacting. Okay, so if that alarm bell is going off in the back of your head, if you are concerned that somebody is at risk of harm, that somebody isn't able to access your sessions properly, that there's just something's not right, your gut is telling you that something's going on and you're not quite sure what it is, even if you're not quite sure what it is, you need to speak to your designated safeguarding lead. Okay. Each organization will have slightly different procedures for that. So you need to look in the policy of the organization, the safeguarding policy of the organization that you're working for, and find out who your designated safeguarding lead is. I would suggest you put the phone number of that designated safeguarding lead in your mobile phone. Okay. And it's there just for emergencies. So I will get phone calls where artists, musicians that are out working in sessions ring me and go, I don't really know if this is a safeguarding issue, but, and I, as a safeguarding lead, would always prefer to get those phone calls than to not. I am never going to be annoyed at somebody for ringing me to check something out, because they're trusting their instincts. They've got that alarm bell that's going off in the back of their head that something's not quite right, and they are calling me to discuss it. I can then, it's my job as the designated safeguarding lead to then decide what to do with that information. So I may ask that musician to put it all in an email. I may ask that musician to fill out a form. Okay. What I will always do is check in on that musician to make sure they're okay, because dealing with safeguarding issues is never particularly nice for the artist, for the person that's doing that reporting. So I always check in on them as well. So again, going back to our principles about protection, protect yourselves as well. So if you have got to deal with a safeguarding issue, make sure you've got some self-care planned into your timetable, into your schedule for your to deal with that. Many organizations will have supervisions. Many organizations will have support services that you can access. And if they don't, then, and you are struggling with something, then don't hold it back. Speak to your line managers, speak to your designated safeguarding leads, and just kind of be honest about that. We don't ever want anybody to get to a point of crisis before asking for help. So the designated safeguarding lead will may ask you to do certain things with that information, which you need to do. And if there is any further conversations or investigations, then you need to comply with that. And that will be written in the safeguarding policy somewhere, that you need to comply with any further investigations. And what the DSL might do with that information really varies. And there's so many different outcomes that could happen. And sometimes you might not know what the outcome of a report is that you've made. And that might be because there's a confidentiality issue, or it might just be that it's just one of those things. But don't ever let that put you off making a report. Okay. even if somebody says, okay, I've investigated and yeah, nothing doing here, we're closing the investigation. That's fine. Don't be disheartened and don't think that you did the wrong thing in making the report, because even though that investigation may have closed, that report will still be on record. So if anything else were to happen in the future, then that report will make up part of that picture and will contribute to any future investigations. Okay. So a designated safeguarding lead may well have, well, I mean, I've got a drawer, a locked drawer in my desk that is, it's got a file in it that's full, and it's quite a thick file of safeguarding reports. And I might get a report about one young person and think, right, fine, yeah, that's quite minor, I'll put it in the file. And then a couple of weeks later, I get another report about the same young person, and I'm like, oh, okay, a bit of a picture, still nothing major. But then like 6 weeks later, I'm getting another report, and I'm starting to now build up a picture about a young person that is quite concerning. And then I'm going to do something with that information. So I always think of safeguarding reports as being a jigsaw. And you don't know what that one piece of the jigsaw is that you've got that might kind of be the missing piece that is right from the center and makes sense of the whole picture for somebody. Okay, so even if you feel like it's quite a minor thing, if it's making that alarm bell ring in the back of your head, then speak to your DSL. Okay. Okay. Does anybody at that point have any questions or comments that they want to raise? Cassia?
In terms of keeping those safeguarding kind of incident reports, what's a safe way to keep that in terms of kind of confidentiality of information?
So as a face-to-face worker, it's not your role to keep those. It is the designated safeguarding lead's role to keep those. Okay. So, and in terms of confidentiality, you need to keep the confidentiality of the participant, or the safeguarding report that you've made needs to be kept confidential. Now, different organizations will have different processes and different guidance on that. But the main thing is, so yeah, this is not pub conversation fodder, yeah. If you do need to discuss it, so sometimes I will come home from work and I will just need to offload to my husband, or I'll be on the phone and I just need to offload, but I'm going to keep places and names out of that report, that conversation, because I'm keeping the identity of the people that I'm talking about confidential. And I'm also clear with the person that I'm talking to that this is not a conversation that they can go off and have elsewhere.
I was thinking more about if it's a written document and in a file, then that file could potentially be something that someone could pick up if it's in a office.
So that's the written document. If you were to write a document and give as a face-to-face worker, you give that to the DSL, and the DSL will have a system for keeping that document safe and secure. Does that make sense? So it's not your job as a face-to-face worker to be keeping those documents.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't be keeping those documents, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as I say, the DSL will have a system for keeping those documents safe and secure.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions at that point? Okay, so confidentiality is a big issue, as I said. So thanks, Cassia, for raising that. as I said, this is not like for general consumption. Yeah, if you make a safeguarding report, that is not something that you then go into the staff room and start having a conversation about. Okay, it's a conversation that you have with the designated safeguarding lead. There's another kind of report that you might make if you have a concern that somebody is at immediate risk of significant harm. So if somebody is going to leave your session and get in a car with a drunk driver, for instance, and you can't get hold of the DSL, this is like immediate, and it's, you know, there's real potential for really serious harm, then you're going to ring 999. Okay, so if there's somebody that's at immediate risk of significant harm, then you ring 999. There will be lots of other kind of ifs and buts. So what if the person that I want to make a safeguard, I'm concerned that actually somebody is causing, one of our staff is causing harm to the young people, to our participants. But I can't make a report to the designated safeguarding lead because they're really good friends. There will be processes in place within your organization's safeguarding procedures. So it depends upon the structure of your organization. It might be that it's a trustee, or if you don't have trustees, there'll be somebody within the local authority that is named, and there should be a phone number within that policy as well. Okay. When doing safeguarding training, a lot of people expect me to sit here and kind of go through lots and lots of signs and indicators of harm and abuse. So I know lots and lots of people that come to me and say they've been to safeguarding training where they've been shown horrific photographs of children that have been injured, or they've had horrible scenarios of things that have happened to children and young people and adults at risk, that they've been then asked to kind of spot what the signs and indicators are. I don't do that because I think I've never done a safeguarding training where people have gone, well, actually, yeah, of course, putting a cigarette out on a child's arm is completely acceptable. And I don't mean to make light of that as a thing, because obviously that's really significant, but I absolutely encourage you all to trust your instincts. You know the people you're working with, you know if something's not right within their behaviors, within things that are happening, because you're all really amazing practitioners that have great relationships with the people that you're working with. If you are interested in different types of abuse and what the definitions are, I would encourage you, I would signpost you towards the NSPCC website. It has an amazing resource on there that goes through lots of different types of harm that children and young people might come to. And then there's also, particularly for adults, there's the Anne Craft Centre. Thank you, Rachel. I always get it mixed up with the Anne Peaker Centre, and one I have to really like double check myself. And they have, that's kind of the go-to. That's kind of like the Anne Craft Centre is kind of like the NSPCC equivalent, but for adult safeguarding. So if you are really interested and you want to look those things up, then do. The biggest thing to think about is that people often do come up with that might not be quite so obvious is any real change in behavior. So if a young person that is normally really vivacious and lively in your sessions suddenly goes very quiet and doesn't kind of engage particularly, or the opposite, or if somebody is coming into your sessions and they've suddenly, out of nowhere, with no reasonable explanation, got several brand new pairs of trainers, or they have somebody that you know comes from a low-income family and has lots of other vulnerabilities within their lives, comes into the session with the latest iPhone with no kind of reasonable explanation of where it came from other than my mate gave it me. Okay, these are going to make things that are going to make alarm bells ring around that young person, that participant being exploited and being groomed. Yeah, there's lots and lots of amazing resources on that website. Okay, so takeaways. This is my gift to you. Again, cheesy graphic to demonstrate my gift to you. The three things that I really want you to kind of think about and to take away from this session are that safeguarding is a proactive thing. It is not a set of procedures that sits on a shelf. It is something that underpins everything that you do. And you are doing it already. You just don't recognize it or articulate it as safeguarding. Know who your DSL is. Have that phone number, have those contact details handy. Okay. The other thing to say about a DSL is if you are working for an organization, so you might be working for a arts charity that is putting you into a school, you need to know who the DSL is for both of those. Okay. And you need to check out what the reporting procedures are for both of those. Most organizations will say that you need to report to both, but check that out and be aware of the setting that you're working in and their safeguarding procedures and the organization that's actually paying your wage. Okay. And then trust your instincts. Okay. We all have our own judgment on things. We all know our participants. We all have experience of building up these relationships and spotting when things just aren't quite right. So talk to your designated safeguarding lead about those things. And it might be that everything is fine and that's normal for that young person or that participant. Oh yeah, that's normal behavior for them. It might be that actually that's that missing piece of the jigsaw that they needed to know about. Okay. These are just some useful resources. You've all had the slides, so hopefully the links you don't need to kind of scribble these down because the links are in the slides. As I said, the NSPCC, huge amounts of resources on there. I appreciate that sometimes the language that they're using is not always that accessible. So yeah, it can be a bit tricky. And sometimes as well, I think the NSPCC website has so much information on it that it can be a bit difficult to kind of navigate your way through that. But yeah, it is a lot of resources on there. The other thing to say about the NSPCC is that their hotline is amazing and their advice line. So if you have got a concern or a question, that you don't feel you can speak to your DSL about, you can ring the NSPCC and speak to them as well. The NSPCC will take anonymous reports, but that comes with a slight caveat that within safeguarding, and anonymity as a reporter cannot always be guaranteed. That's a really tricky one, but you know, if it gets to a point where social services become involved and child protection procedures become involved, then you have an obligation to be complying with that. And whether it's through mistakes or whether it's through necessity, I just caveat and caution that anonymity is not always guaranteed, but please, please, please don't let that ever put you off reporting a concern. The Ancraft Trust, as I said, is the sort of adult safeguarding equivalent for to the NSPCC. Think You Know is a brilliant resource that is run by CEOP, which is the I would love to be able to remember what the acronym stands for, but it's the policing's guide for online safety and exploitation. It's particularly focused at children and young people and keeping them safe. But obviously what they're talking about on there is applicable to everybody. But the reason that I absolutely love it is because the website is split up into different sections. So you've got sections for parents, sections for practitioners, and you've got age appropriate sections for young people. And it starts from age 5. So there's videos and resources on there that are age appropriate, explaining how to keep yourself safe online. So it's a brilliant, brilliant resource. Making safeguarding personal is particularly around adult safeguarding. It's guidance around adult safeguarding, and you'll find it on the local government association. It's published by the local government association. I tried to put a link on there, but it was a ridiculously long link. So if you just Googled making safeguarding personal, their website again has some videos and things on there that are a really good introduction to adult safeguarding, if you are interested. And as I said at the beginning, please, 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 part of my remit as a safeguarding trainer and as the safeguarding associate with youth music is about supporting organisations and being a resource that you can use. So please, if there are any follow-up questions, do email me, and my email address is there. Thank you very much.